Okay, seriously, who hasn't wished they had like a secret decoder ring or something to figure out if someone's into them? Like, honestly, those little signs can be so confusing sometimes. So today, we're taking a deep dive, really exploring those unspoken cues that people give off and what they could mean, especially when it comes to attraction. And just to be clear, we're not talking about playing games or anything like that. This is about getting a better understanding of those subconscious signals that can help us make genuine connections.
Yeah, it's really fascinating how much of attraction happens under the surface. It's not always big, obvious things. Those little, almost invisible cues we give off when we're attracted to someone can actually be really telling.
Totally. Like blushing, for example. I mean, haven't we all been there? That moment when you lock eyes with someone and suddenly you feel that heat creeping up your neck. I always thought it was just me being, I don't know, awkward, but there's a whole science behind blushing, right?
Absolutely. Blushing is actually more than just a cute reaction. It's a real physiological response that's triggered by this rush of adrenaline.
Hmm.
When we're attracted to someone, our body goes into this mini fight or flight mode. Blood rushes to the surface of our skin, especially in the face, and that's what creates that rosy glow.
So it's like our body's giving us away, even when we're trying to play it cool.
Exactly.
And speaking of subconscious signals, what about playing with hair? I see people do this all the time, but I could never figure out, is it flirting? Is it nerves? Like, what's the deal?
Well, it can be a little bit of both, to be honest. When we're attracted to someone, we get self-conscious, right? We want to look our best. So there's this natural instinct to sort of preen ourselves. And playing with our hair can be part of that. It's like subconsciously trying to get someone to notice us, even if we don't realize we're doing it.
So it's like a way of saying, hey, look at me,
Oh.
without actually having to say it out loud.
Exactly.
It's amazing how much these small things can say. And it's not always just hair, is it? Sometimes it's people fidgeting with their jewelry, adjusting their clothes, even like smoothing out wrinkles that weren't even there a second ago.
Yeah, you're right. And all of those behaviors, they kind of tie into this whole psychology of presenting our best selves. It's something you see across nature, too. Like
Yeah.
birds will preen their feathers, peacocks show off their plumage. It's all about trying to appear as attractive as possible. So when someone adjusts their clothing around you, it could be that they're subconsciously trying to, improve the image they're projecting.
So the next time I catch myself fiddling with my outfit, I'll know what's going on.
Exactly.
But, okay, what about smiling? I mean, everyone smiles, right? How can you tell if a smile is like genuine or if it's just someone being polite?
That's where the art of observation really comes in. A polite smile, it tends to be pretty brief, doesn't really reach the eyes. But a genuine smile that engages your whole face, you'll see the muscles around the eyes crinkle up, and it usually lasts a little longer. It just feels warmer.
Yeah, it's like that smize that Tyra Banks always talks about, smiling with your eyes. You can totally tell the difference between a real smile and one that's just for show.
Exactly. And did you know there's actually something called mirroring that plays a role in this too?
Hearing.
Yeah, it's this fascinating subconscious thing where we start imitating the body language of someone we like.
Wait, so like if someone leans in while I'm talking and I instinctively lean in too.
Exactly. Or if they smile, you might find yourself smiling back without even realizing it. It's our body's way of building that connection and showing we're on the same wavelength.
Wow, that's incredible. I'm definitely going to be watching for that now. It's like there's this whole secret language of attraction happening all around us.
It really is. And speaking of body language, let's talk about another one, adjusting clothing. Have you ever noticed how someone might fidget with their shirt or smooth out their skirt when they're around someone they find attractive?
Oh yeah, totally. It's like suddenly their clothes don't fit right or something. I remember once I had this huge crush on this guy, and every time he was around, I swear I felt like I was swimming in my own clothes.
That's a perfect example. And again, it goes back to that idea of wanting to present our best selves. We get self-conscious, we become really aware of how we look, and so we start fidgeting, adjusting, just trying to fix any little thing we think looks off.
I guess it's kind of cute in a way. It shows they care, right?
Okay.
Okay, here's one that I've always wondered about. What about biting the lower lip? What's that all about?
Oh, that's a really interesting one. Biting the lower lip, it can mean a few things. Nervousness, holding back desire, even a bit of playfulness. It draws attention to the mouth, which is a really sensual part of the body, so it can be a subconscious way of, emphasizing that attraction.
Now that you mention it, I feel like I've seen that move in tons of movies and TV shows, especially when they're trying to show attraction.
Exactly. It's like this universal visual cue. And speaking of physical cues, let's talk about the power of touch.
Okay, but this is where things can get a little tricky, right? Not everyone's comfortable with being touched, so respecting boundaries is super important.
Oh, absolutely. Consent and respect are the most important things. But when touch is done appropriately, even something small like a light touch on the arm during a conversation, it can create a feeling of connection and intimacy.
You know, it's interesting how even a quick touch can really stick with you.
Yeah.
Like you might remember that brief connection long after the conversation is over.
That's so true. Touch has this primal power to it. It's a really powerful form of nonverbal communication.
Yeah, touch can be so powerful, for conveying those feelings that you don't say out loud. It's like a whole secret language for expressing connection and intimacy and all that. But it's also a language that you got to be careful with, right? Like always respecting people's boundaries and making sure everyone's comfortable.
For sure, for sure. Reading the signals, understanding the context, all of that is so important. So let's move on to another interesting cue, asking personal questions. Is that a sure sign that someone's interested? Like, is that a giveaway?
It definitely can be, yeah. When we're really curious about someone, genuinely intrigued, we want to know them better, right? So we ask about their passions, what they've been through, their hopes and dreams. It's a way of saying, hey, I want to know the real you. Yeah, I've noticed that too. Like when I'm really interested in someone, I find myself asking way more questions than usual. Like I can't get enough information. But it's not just about asking questions, right? It's about actually listening to the answers, showing that you're really engaged.
Oh, absolutely. Active listening is so important. Making eye contact, nodding along, responding in a thoughtful way, those are all cues that tell the other person, hey, I'm listening, and what you're saying matters to me.
Right, right. When you feel like someone's truly listening to you, it builds this sense of trust and connection. Okay, let's talk about eye contact for a second. They always say eyes are the windows to the soul, but how much eye contact is too much? There's a fine line between a smoldering look and a creepy stare, isn't there?
You're totally right. It's all about finding that balance. Prolonged eye contact, it can create a sense of intimacy, but it can also feel intimidating if it's not reciprocated. Think about those times when you lock eyes with someone across a room and you feel that spark. It's like this unspoken recognition and instant connection.
Oh, I totally been there. It's like your eyes are doing the talking before you even say a word.
Exactly. It's crazy how much communication can happen without even opening your mouth. Speaking of eyes, there's another cue we haven't talked about yet, pupil dilation.
Ooh, tell me more. I know our pupils get bigger in low light, like when you walk into a dark room. But is there more to it than that?
Yeah, the low light thing is true. But did you know that our pupils also dilate when we see something or someone that we find attractive? It's a subconscious response, a physiological signal that we're visually stimulated, you could say.
Whoa, really? So it's like our eyes are literally widening with interest. That's wild.
Exactly. It's subtle, but it's a powerful cue.
This is blowing my mind. I'm suddenly super aware of my own pupils.
Don't worry, it's all happening below the surface. We can't consciously control it, but we can definitely learn to recognize it in others.
Okay, last one for this section. And I think it kind of ties into a lot of what we've been talking about leaning in. What does it mean when someone leans in during a conversation?
It usually means they want to be closer to you, both physically and emotionally. When we're attracted to someone, we naturally want to be near them. Leaning in is a way of closing that gap, of entering their personal space in a way that feels inviting.
It's like we're drawn to them, like magnets. There's that magnetic pull when there's mutual attraction.
That's a great analogy. It really shows the power of nonverbal communication, how it shapes our interactions.
We've covered so much already, but I'm curious, are there any other subtle cues we might be missing?
Oh, there are so many layers to attraction. We've talked about the physical stuff, but even our voice, our tone, the way we speak can be super revealing too. Have you ever noticed how you might start talking like someone you spend a lot of time with?
Oh my gosh, yes. My best friend and I, people tell us we sound exactly alike when we're together. It's kind of freaky, but also hilarious.
That's a perfect example of mirroring. It's not just body language. When we're in sync with someone, we subconsciously pick up their rhythms and cadences. It's a way of building that rapport and creating a sense of shared identity.
That's fascinating. It's like our brains are wired to connect with people we like on all these different levels,
Yeah.
physically, emotionally, even the way we speak.
It's true. And it shows just how complex and multi-layered attraction really is.
Okay, I have another question. We've talked a lot about the signs that someone might be interested in you, but what about the signs that you might be sending out without even realizing it? Like, how do you know if you're the one giving mixed signals?
That's such a good point. Just like we're picking up on cues from others, they're picking up on cues from us too. It goes both ways. That's why self-awareness is so important.
It's like we're all speaking different dialects of the same language. And sometimes we need a little help with the translation.
Exactly. And that's where paying attention to those subtle cues, both in ourselves and in others, can be really helpful.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. I feel like I have a whole new set of tools for understanding attraction.
It's been great exploring this with you. Hopefully our listeners are feeling empowered to decode those unspoken signals and navigate the world of attraction with a bit more confidence and awareness.
Totally. But before we wrap up, I have one last question. We've talked about all these subtle cues, but if our listeners could only remember one thing from this deep dive, what should it be?
That's a great question. I think the most important thing to remember is that while these signs can be helpful, they're not foolproof. Everyone's different, and what might be a sign of attraction for one person could mean something totally different for someone else. So don't overthink it. Don't get so caught up in analyzing every little gesture that you miss the bigger picture. Trust your gut, and most importantly, communicate openly and honestly.
So it all comes back to communication. At the end of the day, the best way to know if someone's interested is to just ask.
You got it. Be brave. Be yourself, and remember that the right connections will happen naturally.
Love that. So to all our listeners out there, as you go about your day, keep your eyes open, your hearts open, and keep those communication channels flowing. You never know what sparks might fly. So we've been talking about all these fascinating subtle signs of attraction, but before we wrap up, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier about the importance of context. You mentioned that what might be a sign of attraction for one person could mean something totally different for another person, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Context is super important when you're trying to read these cues. One single behavior might not tell the whole story. You have to factor in the person, the situation, the overall vibe of the interaction, all of that.
But it's not like there's this set list of attraction signals that you can just memorize and check off.
Right. It's more about being present in the moment, paying attention, using your intuition to kind of piece everything together. And sometimes the strongest signal of all is just a feeling, that gut instinct that tells you, hey, there's something special here.
I think that's so important. It's easy to get caught up in overanalyzing every little thing, and we forget to trust our own gut feeling.
Yeah, it's like we're trying to solve a math problem instead of just enjoying the dance. Attraction's this mix of biology, psychology, social dynamics, all of that. There's no one-size-fits-all answer.
So instead of getting stuck in the technical stuff, we should focus more on the big picture, the energy, the connection, how it feels to be around that person.
Absolutely. Trust your gut, be authentic, and let those natural feelings of attraction guide you.
This has been such a great conversation. I feel like I have a whole new understanding of how attraction works.
It's been fun exploring it with you. And to everyone listening, remember to keep your eyes open, keep your hearts open, and don't be afraid to trust your intuition. The world of attraction is full of surprises, and sometimes the best connections are the ones you least expect.
So true. Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. Until next time, keep those sparks flying.